It was 2014 when I discovered Shopify. Basically, I was doing some additional freelance work from somebody I had actually connected with on Twitter. And he was like, hey, I have this project that needs to be completed. It's on Shopify. I know you've never used it before. Do you want to try it out? And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And so I immediately fell in love with the platform, which, it's always funny reflecting back on looking so far back on a platform that is, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
because it's changed so much. It's evolved so much. And yet even that experience was just so cool.
Awesome. So you are one of the OG of the Shopify
Oh, yeah.
community. Yeah.
August actually this month is a decade of working with Shopify.
That's a huge milestone.
Agency that specializes in e-commerce, and then the pandemic hits. This is one of those things where I hope is not repeatable for the future, because I don't want another pandemic to happen. Yes. But it was such a boon for business, because all these companies, all these businesses that have historically always been strictly brick and mortar, physical office space or physical retail space, now need to get online, or else they need to shut down. 2020, the Taproom was already listed as a Shopify Plus partner, and so we were working with larger brands at this point. More the medium-sized businesses, not like the super, super large companies at the time, but enough where like our minimum project spend was about $30,000. I think we surpassed $1.4 million. And the year before that was around. What's happening is you get like 4 months into working on a contract with somebody, and they pull the plug. And that was income we were depending on that we shouldn't have been depending on. For those who are just coming out of undergrad, that are just, finishing up a boot camp, like it is poor timing. Like it is unfortunate, but this is the state of the market right now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is where you feel like you don't deserve what you have right this moment. This might be, I don't deserve to have a seat at this table to be having this conversation. Like, why am I here? Like, I'm not equipped.
So welcome guys to Yellow Let's Code Podcast, a podcast where we interview software engineers to share their entrepreneurial story. And we have Kylie, the founder of the Taproom Agency, currently working as the director of engineering at Spot AI, the co-host of the Ladybug Podcast with Emma, Ellie, and Sydney. Also a course instructor for management fundamental for tech leader. Also, you have a newsletter called Lesson in Engineer Leadership. So let's see you after this intro. And let's introduce Kylie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was a really long intro of the things that I do. I definitely keep busy, don't I?
Yes. Can you give the audience more insight about how did you get started in web development?
Yeah, so I taught myself how to code when I was 11. I learned from a book called HTML Goodies, and I just was learning on my own for quite some time. I started freelancing when I was 14 years old. My first deal that I had was for basically an online catalog, not really an online store because the e-commerce component wasn't there yet. For a hunting supplies store for a small business in Michigan. I was paid a t-shirt. Not really a great deal, but it was experience at the time, and I continued to freelance all through undergrad and grad school, and obviously eventually went into it as my full-time job.
Awesome. So after you start like learning web development and you start freelancing, how long have you been working as a freelancer before you start your agency, the Taproom Agency?
So if you don't count the deal that I did at 14, because it's a little hairy if you want to include that one. I think I officially started freelancing more seriously about my junior year of undergrad, which would have been 2010. And then I continued to freelance through grad school, which I finished in December of 2014. I had a fellowship at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I was still freelancing while I was there. And then at that point, I was making more money freelancing than I was through this fellowship program that I had. So when my husband and I got married and I could get on his health insurance, I left the fellowship program and went full-time on my own. And that would have been September of 2015. So that now puts us at starting the agency in October of 2017. So it was about 7 years of freelancing before I started the agency.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. And you started directly with the Shopify, or because the Taproom Agency is well known as a Shopify agency, but did you start it as a Shopify agency or like just a web development agency more general?
The Taproom started as Shopify, but I was doing non-Shopify work before that. And so I actually got most of my start in more of the WordPress side of things. So I did a fair bit of just, informational sites on WordPress, blogs, that kind of thing. I built some WooCommerce sites as well, and then some just like CMS type websites too. It was in grad school about that time. It was 2014 when I discovered Shopify. Basically, I was doing some additional freelance work from somebody I had actually connected with on Twitter. And he was like, "Hey, I have this project that needs to be completed. It's on Shopify. I know you've never used it before. Do you want to try it out?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" And so I immediately fell in love with the platform, which, it's always funny reflecting back on looking so far back on a platform that is 10 years ago,
Yeah.
because it's changed so much, it's evolved so much, and yet even that experience was just so cool to me. So yeah, that's kind of how I started. And once I kind of said, okay, Shopify's really cool, I created a Shopify partner account. And at that time, you only needed to launch 5 stores in your account to become a Shopify expert, what was called a
Okay.
setup expert. And so I struck a deal with this guy who was already listed as a Shopify expert, saying, "Hey, get me my 4 more deals, and I'll, pay me less money, but like let's just do a deal here so I could get listed as an expert." And it took a month for me to actually get that status. It's super fast, because at this point, the Shopify Experts network was so incredibly small that there was no competition. It was like me and 2 others in the entire southeastern region of the United States, which is pretty great. And so with that, I never needed to touch like another non-Shopify project at all. I think this is worth noting, especially for folks who are interested in kind of transitioning into full-time entrepreneurship. I actually had you could call it a part-time contract job with a company who had WordPress sites that I just had them on retainer for 20 hours. It was about 20 hours a month, I want to say. It wasn't a ton of time, but it was enough where I knew I was absolutely going to be making that money. And I knew I wouldn't have to be, constantly selling, constantly trying to close deals. I'd be able to pay our bills, or like my part of the bills, of course. And so having that stability before I kind of went all in on just doing my own thing was really, really helpful.
Awesome. So you are one of the OG of the Shopify
Oh yeah,
community. Yeah.
August actually this month is a decade of working with Shopify.
Wow, that's a huge milestone. I joined like a Shopify, I think around the pandemic, so 2020. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of change since this time.
Oh,
And I would
absolutely.
like to know, how was the experience back then with working with Shopify? Because I think the community was pretty small back then.
Oh, it was, yeah, very, very different. I built right into the theme editor when I needed to make changes to themes. There was no concept of like modules within a theme. Like everything was hard coded. There you couldn't really extend themes very well. The number of settings that were available for products were, very limited. Meta fields weren't a thing yet, so there was no custom information for products. It was in the product description. It's like a lot of really little things that are just so different. Shopify apps, I think when I joined the ecosystem, there were maybe 200 apps in the App Store. Maybe. Could have been, it's somewhere around that general number. And, it's massive now. There's so many apps. I actually, there were not very many starters, like app starters, to actually build your own at the time. And I wanted to basically build what is now meta fields for one of my clients. And so I launched a custom Shopify app for them, not in the App Store, just, specifically for them. And the only app starter that existed at the time was Ruby on Rails. And I had never touched Ruby on Rails in my life before. So now I have to learn this concept, like this MVC concept, which at the time I'm just like, what is this? I'm like a JavaScript developer. And so that was quite a learning curve. And it's kind of funny reflecting back on launching that because I deployed it to Heroku. I couldn't get the app to stay online. Like it would just go to sleep and I'm like, I have no idea what's happening here. This is totally new territory for me. So what I ended up doing was I installed some sort of like extension into the Heroku app that I had deployed at the time. All it did was throw an error every like 4 hours. And so the app never went to sleep and I never had to worry about it. It was the hackiest solution ever. But hey, it worked. They used it for like a year and a half before they decided to shut down the business. And I was like, cool. Well, there's my first Shopify app.
Yeah, that's really that's really good story about your first Shopify app with the Heroku. Because yeah, back then it's Heroku. There's like a you need to keep some activity in the app to be able to make the project still running, like
Exactly.
on the hobby plan. Yeah, it was really good time.
Yeah. And it was such a new concept to me because I had always done, like basic web hosting. My history, as I was just talking about it on Twitter, my history is like FTP. Like, we didn't do anything super complicated at the time. And so deploying something to even a managed host like Heroku was already a step ahead of what I had actually experienced in the past. So totally new realm. I had no idea what I was doing, but we make it work.
Yep, exactly. And also, I think from what I remember during that time, when you are working at the Taproom Agency, you have been also have an ebook for freelancer. I think I got it back then when I started freelancing, so I think it was really good content there. And talking about that period, I would like to get more information about how the Taproom Agency has been doing back then during that time, and also I will be talking about the ebook after all.
Yeah. Yeah. So starting with the tap room, when you're running an agency that specializes in e-commerce and then the pandemic hits, this is one of those things where I hope is not repeatable for the future because I don't want another pandemic to happen. But it was such a boon for business because all these companies, all these businesses that have historically always been strictly brick and mortar, physical office space or physical retail space now need to get online or else they need to shut down. The floodgates just open with requests. And it was at the point where I was just like, okay, let me put together some really, really small package, low effort for us. Let's just get them online and we'll just keep it at that. So this was helping grow, just like keeping leads coming in. It wasn't really target customer that I was going after at this time though, because by 2020, the Taproom was already listed as a Shopify Plus partner. And so we were working with larger brands at this point. More the medium-sized businesses, not like the super, super large companies at the time, but enough where like our minimum project spend was about $30,000. And that kind of outpriced most brick and mortar businesses. They're just like, I just need to get online, which is why it required a project to put together to kind of keep the scope limited. But yeah, in that time, 2021 was by far our biggest revenue year. I shut it down in 2022 for reference. So 2021, I think we surpassed $1.4 million. And the year before that was around 780, I want to say. So we almost doubled our revenue from 2021 to 2022, or 2020 to 2021. And it was tough. Honestly, it was really tough because all of a sudden I needed more people to cover the amount of work we were doing.
Yes.
And we were moving up market. And so we were talking to much larger companies that had very large budgets, that had very long lead times. The larger the deal, the longer it typically takes to close. And then you have, between the pandemic and supply chain issues and all these kind of things, a lot of these companies are suddenly cutting their budget for working with e-commerce. And what ends up happening is you get like 4 months into working on a contract with somebody and they pull the plug. And that was income we were depending on that we shouldn't have been depending on. So at this point, I'm just kind of like, this is too much. I'm stressed out from having to have the number of people that they're actual full-time employees. And we're just not bringing in enough work that we need to cover this. And the last thing I want to do is layoffs, obviously. But it got to the point where I just could not finance the Taproom anymore, which is what led me to eventually winding down operations at the end of March in 2022, which I joined Spot in April of 2022. So there's that. Jumping back to the book. So the book is called Start Freelancing Today.
Yes.
This was a pandemic project for me. I challenged myself to write a book in a month. I just want to self-publish this book in a month, see what I can do. I've been freelancing for so long at this point, I could talk about it in my sleep. And so I'm like, let me just put it on paper. Let me just see what happens, get it published into a book. And I started actually collecting pre-orders in beginning of June, and I launched at the beginning of July. And so it was actually a really great experience. And I think it was kind of my first foray into pre-sales for something like that, building hype for something. And now I've learned a lot from that, and it's something I would absolutely repeat again. Timing of the actual book release itself was a little unfortunate, but we don't have to go into that side of things. But either way, I still made about $30,000 from this book that I had spent a month writing and editing and self-publishing. So really not bad as far as the time investment goes. And it was a cool experience too. Even now, I don't sell the book through my own means anymore. It is listed on Amazon to purchase, and I have it in Kindle format specifically on Amazon.
Awesome. Yeah, this book is highly recommended. I got it back then when I started freelancer, so I will put the link for the Amazon link for someone interested about. And thank you for mentioning all the backstory of how the Taproom Agency has been shut down, and so people will have more insight about what happened behind the scene.
Oh,
and
yeah.
with this bubble, e-commerce bubble during the pandemic, because a lot of people also not in e-commerce specifically, but also in tech in general, a lot of people get impacted by this, especially with a massive layoff after the pandemic has been ended. There's a massive layoffs because of that a hyper growth that happened during the pandemic, and people are thinking that will be for a long time, but suddenly when something go to normal, everyone is back to the office, everything is back to physical, and there's a lot of layoffs because of that, unfortunately.
There are a couple of things that kind of happen with that. One, there was a lot of venture capital money in 2021-ish time, where if you had an idea, somebody out there wanted to finance it. You didn't even have to really prove yourself at that point. Somebody is just let's throw money at this and see what sticks. It was a very different mentality in the VC space, where it was growth at all costs. Hire, grow your team, scale exponentially. This is how we're going to make more money. When everything kind of started to topple a little bit, right around the time of the FTX collapse, actually. So kind of around the same time as the crypto collapse, a lot of these venture capitalists decided changed their tone. And it went from growth at all costs to being very reserved and very thoughtful with the way that you spend your money. And that means that it's the exact opposite of, hey, let's hire a bunch of people. And suddenly when you need to start being very conservative with how you're spending your money, then you end up with these layoffs. And they have too many people who they hired during the growth at all costs time, and they can no longer support the financial, they cannot financially support that many employees. And so that's how we ended up with layoffs. The other side of that is a lot of people started companies during the pandemic, because early pandemic, folks got laid off. They started an organization. They hired people. A lot of businesses fail. Most businesses fail. And when you have a business failing, it means all its employees are going to be out of work as well. So it's not just these larger organizations that are laying people off. There are so many more people that we never heard about who lost their job as well because the company they were working for went under. Mine was the same thing. Everyone who worked at the taproom, they lost their job because I was no longer running the taproom anymore. And so you had just this massive influx of people from both the layoff side and these small companies going under side. That was just really, really unfortunate. And we're still feeling the pain today. We're still seeing layoffs happen. Even yesterday, I think VMware just announced another big layoff that they just did. There's another company recently that announced a layoff but said they weren't actually going to announce who it was for 30 days or something like that, which whole different conversation to have there. But anyway, like there are more people in the space right now, and there are not enough people hiring. Like that is the sad reality of it.
Yes, exactly. I think in 2023 and 24, there's like a hiring freeze, and a lot of people are get impacted by this, and also the people that currently having a job are getting stressed because they don't know if the next day will get laid off or not. So it's really stressful situation in this area, especially in tech, because before that time there is a lot of like a hiring and you have a lot of opportunity to be able to join company, but currently people are and like a people hiring are picky about which one they hire because they don't want to like fire them after that. So it's really such stressful situation currently for. And I also am thinking about like especially new grad, because like a new grad they don't have experience and they want to get a job, so it's really hard for them to get a job in this situation, and hopefully it will get fixed soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel for those who are just coming out of undergrad, that are just, finishing up a boot camp. Like it is poor timing. Like it is unfortunate, but this is the state of the market right now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately. Talking about the pandemic, I think you started a Twitch live stream with the Kylie plus Kylie with the Shopify dev team. It was really good, like a live stream back then. I really enjoyed it. It was like you are building a Shopify app. It's like a Shopee point or something like that. Can you give us more insight about this one, about this experience?
Yeah. Yeah. So he's no longer working at Shopify now, but Thomas Kelly,
Yes.
he was my counterpart in this Twitch stream where we would just hop on and show kind of behind the scenes what it looks like to build a Shopify app and answer questions that folks had about getting into the Shopify space. As like a developer, whether, on kind of giving that visibility into what it's like to either build on top of Shopify as like a third party dev, or hearing stories from Thomas, who is working at Shopify at the time. So you kind of get those both sides. And he's just my perfect counterpart for this kind of thing because we just got each other so well. So that was a fun time. I really enjoyed those streams. Definitely disappointed that they ended, but everything has its time and place. But it was a lot of fun. You can still see, I think they're all still available on YouTube. If you want to go back and watch them. It's just Kelly plus Kelly is what it was called with, the Shopify liquid name.
Yes. Yeah.
You can add a link. It's way easier than trying to explain it.
Yeah. I will add all the link in the description so you can follow along with this one. But it was really good time because I think during this time I was also learning Shopify app development, and it was like a good timing for me to be able to experience that. And it was like a entertaining show for developer. It wasn't. It's like a live coding session, but more like a show. I would say it was like a good entertainment part there.
Yes. It's very much like Jason Lingstorf. All the live streams he does, like with Learn with Jason, are so fantastic.
Yes.
And they're very, very entertaining.
Yes, exactly. And entertaining, and you will learn a lot from them. So this is like the best like a
Exactly.
both world.
Sure.
Awesome. So the next part will be about the Ladybug podcast. So you are currently the co-host of the Ladybug podcast with Emma, Ellie, and Sydney, and currently you are working on the season number 7. Can we talk more about the Ladybug podcast and how it gets started from the
Yeah.
first place?
Yeah. So we have 6 seasons of the Ladybug podcast available at ladybug.dev. We started this podcast to just, add our voices into this space for women in tech. Who, we just talk tech, career, and code. So there's a lot of really good information, for all levels, honestly. But we do a good job on 101 content, I would say, in particular. If you're new to like if you want to dive deeper into CSS or, GraphQL or, any kind of technology, we do a good job breaking those down. We have all kinds of guests that come on to talk through some different topics where they're experts. And then we also talk just career, what are we doing? What are books that we like? How are we? There's an entire episode on talking entrepreneurship. Like there's a lot of really interesting things that we could, that we cover over 6 seasons. So Season 7 is all engineering management, and it's all me and Emma. So we're super excited to record that one. We have the episode list already available on, I think, our Twitter account and the website. So you can kind of get a sneak peek into that. We were supposed to record that in June, or July, one of those two. I think June, and it got delayed. So we're still working on scheduling that one out, but it'll be a good season for sure.
Yeah, awesome. So for people that interested, it's one of the most listening the podcast for software engineer stuff. So you currently have like a more than I think about a 1 million listener and
Yeah.
like a more than 80 episode. So it's like a big number for a podcast in this space. So definitely check them out. So it will be a lot of great content there, and also the chemistry between the hosts are really great. So you will not feel bored while are you listening
Again,
to the podcast. Yeah.
it's very entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. And also, recently you started the Win courses. So I think your first course is Management Fundamental for Tech Leader. Can you give us more insight about this one? I think because
Yeah.
I think it's your first course online.
It is, yes. So I run this course through a platform called Maven. And Management Fundamentals for Tech Leaders is really for anyone who is either considering going into management, or they're currently a manager, and they, a lot of people kind of get thrown into that managerial role without ever actually getting trained for it. And so this really teaches you the one-on-one on how to be a great leader. So what that looks like is we kind of break down three pillars of trust, communication, and empowerment. And we work through how these are exemplified across the managerial space. So talk about identifying performers on your team, whether they're high performers or low performers, and how to support them, running one-on-ones, doing development check-ins with your team, how to handle conflict, managing up and down the chain of command. We talk through feedback. We have an entire module all on giving and receiving feedback and reframing what good feedback looks like. So it's a very, very useful course. I'm only running it one more time in the month, or in 2024, which will be the month of September. But I'll pick it back up again next year. I am actually working on another course right now. Still early. I don't have the landing page up yet for it. But that's going to be on overcoming imposter syndrome. So my background is I have a bachelor's in psychology and my master's in social work. So I'm a trained therapist. And so a lot of this comes through, especially in the tech space where we all deal with imposter syndrome, whether you're brand new to the into like your career in general, your field, or you've been in it for a long time. Like imposter syndrome never goes away. But there are tricks you can do for identifying it, moving past it, and tools that you can have in your toolkit for when you're feeling a particular way, where you can say, okay, here are the resources that I already have at hand. Look at all these great things that I've accomplished. Like, I deserve to be here. So really just reframing how to kind of work through imposter syndrome. So that's going to be a self-paced course. The Management Fundamentals for Tech Leaders is a live course. So it's an hour and a half of sessions over 3 days. And then, so this one's going to be self-paced, so you can kind of work through the recorded content yourself, and then there'll probably be like weekly or bi-weekly Q&As. I'm still kind of figuring out the logistics around that. So you can kind of, expand beyond just that written content, but you'll be able to do it on your own time, which is very beneficial for time zones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Talking about your first course, can you give us more insight about how was the experience making that course? And it's like a live one, because usually the courses that people will put, it's like I will self-serve, so you can just like pre-record the content and the people will consume it like whenever they like. How was the experience making your first online courses, and it's a live one? I think it's double the trouble.
It really is. It is. Yeah. So it was an interesting experience. I do a lot of public speaking. So I speak at a lot of conferences. And so I already had some sort of baseline of where I wanted to take this. And so basically what I did was I worked really closely with the Maven team on the content. They were really helpful for supporting me in figuring out how to narrow down my focus to make sure there's enough content there, but I'm not trying to like reach every single individual in some sort of leadership type role. So by narrowing down who I'm focusing on, I was able to then think about, okay, what's most important for this content? The way that I approached writing the content was I literally just opened up a Google Doc and added a bunch of bullet points. Like, here are things that I'm interested in talking about that I think are really necessary for somebody to learn. From there, I then grouped it. Okay, what themes do I have going on here? And I pulled 3 themes out of that. At some point, I actually had 4, and then I mushed it kind of into 3 to keep it to fewer days of classes. And then I was like, all right, how long will it actually take me to get through this content? And so when I built out the slide deck for this, I paced myself. I recorded myself kind of talking through it to see exactly how long it took. And then one thing that I realized with this content is it requires a lot of participation. And that means I need a small enough group to warrant that participation. So I capped the number of students in a cohort to 10 people.
Okay.
So could I have made a lot more money with larger cohorts? Sure, absolutely. Yeah. But I decided to opt for the opposite. I spoke at Render ATL this past year, and I actually did 2 workshops of this content to 50 people in over the course of 4 hours. So I was able to see what it's like with a larger group as well, with like breakout sessions and so on. So now I know it actually does work in a larger group. I just, for now, I just cut the virtual ones to about 10 people at a time. But yeah, that's kind of the process I went through. So I did my first cohort in February, and I gave myself an hour and a half. It's highly dependent, I know now, on the students that you bring on. They have to be, they have to participate. And so depending on how participatory they are, depends on how close you're going to be to that kind of hour and a half limit per day. And so I actually went overtime the first 2 days, and that was on time the 3rd day for the first cohort that I did. And then I was able to kind of finagle the content a little bit to figure out how to actually do this in keep it within the timer, even finish a little early, like 5 to 10 minutes early maximum. So nobody has to worry about going over, because an hour and a half is a pretty big commitment during the workday for already.
Yes. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you for giving us more insight about the backstory of that live course, because I think it's really hard to be able to make like a live course, and you need to deal with a lot of things. You mentioned it, the student, like how participate they are, and the question, and you need to fit all of this in like the timeline that you have, which is 1 hour and a half, which for some people might seem a lot, but at the same time you need to like manage it well, so you can fit all the content that you need to present in the course during that time. Because if you are not managing that well, you will be like a long session.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yep.
You mentioned a good thing about your next course, which is imposter syndrome. And in the tech space general, and more specifically software engineer, we are constantly hearing this imposter syndrome. Can you give us more detail about like how people can tell this is an imposter syndrome, and or really it's like a lower self-confidence? Because it might seem similar in some way, but at the same time it's different. Can you give us more insight about what is exactly imposter syndrome and how people can react and deal with this? Because it will be an ongoing thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So imposter syndrome is where you feel like you don't deserve what you have right this moment. This might be, I don't deserve to have a seat at this table to be having this conversation. Like, why am I here? Like, I'm not equipped to do this. Or why am I the one who's taking on this really big project? This is so beyond my capabilities. Like, I'm going to mess this up and it's going to be terrible. There's obvious crossover with a lack of self-confidence to imposter syndrome. I think imposter syndrome, the way that I think about it is that there are external factors at play. That perhaps somebody else believes in you and thinks that you're capable of doing this, which is why you're in this position in the first place. Or, if you're an entrepreneur and, you have somebody in your inbox saying, hey, I want an estimate for a site build, and our budget is $100,000, and you've never sold something larger than $25,000 at the time. You're obviously not going to tell them this, but you're going to be like, am I capable of delivering a $100,000 product? That's imposter syndrome as well. So first off, if you can define it, then you can figure out, okay, what do I actually need to do about this? And what you really need to do is take that step back and say, okay, what led me to where I am today? There's a combination of luck and skill all the time. You know, right place, right time is always going to be part of our career. Right place, right time for me was I saw a tweet that got me freelance work that led me to Shopify. Right place, right time was getting into the Shopify Experts program 10 years ago. Like, that is a major, major difference from trying to do it today. It's just a totally different kind of landscape. Right place, right time. I had a recruiter connection to get me the job at Spot. You know, and the hiring manager, I knew the hiring manager. And so I was able to get coaching through the entire interview process. That got me to where I am today. But luck is only one part of it. Skill is the other part of this. And skill is, you know, you worked to get to this point. There's a reason why some large company who has $100,000 budget is reaching out to you, because they believe that you can build this website. You know, they're not going to say, okay, well, I'm just going to reach out to a bunch of random, you know, I don't really think that they're going to be capable of it. Why would they waste their time?
Yeah.
You know, we're all
make
busy.
sense,
Exactly. And so same thing, like, let's say your manager gives you a project where you're like, I am so over my head and I have no idea how I could possibly do this myself, or I need to lead this project with 2 other engineers and I've never led a project before and I have no idea what I'm doing. Well, if I'm putting you in that position, there's a reason for it. I believe even if it's outside of your comfort zone, it's something you can learn and it's something that you can figure out. And you've been putting work into this point to get to where you are today. So that's the reframing, is figuring out, this is part luck, this is part skill. Really lean into the skill. Like, you know you have that. And kind of figure out what that next step is going to be. Okay, so I'm now in this position. I acknowledge, like, this is imposter syndrome. Now what do I do about it? And how that actually, that next step kind of takes place is really situational. Like, what exactly is it that you're feeling imposter syndrome around? For some people, it's just going to be like, hey, you need to like literally go look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you can do this. Like, hey, you've been doing this for so long, like, you could do this one as well. It could be you have a folder on your computer of all the great things that you have accomplished over time. I have a screenshot of a newsletter or an article that MailChimp had written about me back in 2017 that was just called A Freelance Success Story. And whenever I was feeling like I can't do this, I just pull that up and read that story, and I'm like, oh wow, I actually have done a lot to get to where I am today. This does make sense. Sometimes you just need that extra support that you've had before. And then that's the third thing, is like, who is in your network who can kind of boost you up when you're feeling down. And this is why it's so helpful to not go about it alone. You know, find your people, find a community where you feel like, you know, if I'm having a particularly bad day and I'm like, I can't do this, I know I can text certain people and be like, I need you to hype me up. Just like, tell me something that is going to make me feel a whole lot better about whatever situation I'm about to go into, and know that I will get to the other side of this. So that's a lot of kind of what we're going to be talking about. So I have, for this course, I'm working on actual worksheets for this, where you can kind of help frame your thoughts and reframe your thoughts and think through what's luck, what's skill. How do I actually create this folder of all these success stories I have? Where should I put this? How should it be set up? All this kind of stuff is actually going to be spelled out in a very clear format, which is why it is also self-paced, because it's going to require you to, you know, sit and think about some of these things. So yeah, I'm really excited about the course. I think it's going to be a really good one. Very, very useful one.
Yeah, I think so, because just for the stuff that you mentioned, it does like have good insight about imposter syndrome, especially in our area, in our industry, because a lot of people are dealing with this. Some people are afraid to be able to talk about it, because maybe if I talk about it, I will be like in a weird situation or something like this, because they might be thinking I am like an imposter, which you are not. In like most of cases, you are not, because there is always like a reason behind a decision. For example, if someone give you a project to work on, there is a reason behind that you are the chosen one. There is it's not like a random decision. There is always like a good reason, because you are the one that you are capable of doing that job and delivering that product itself. And also you mentioned some great stuff. And one of the things that I do, like myself, I have like a Notion page where I call it All of Love. So it's like all of the stuff that I done, like a screenshot, maybe like some PR comment, some stuff like this. I always like have it there when I am feeling like an imposter, or like I don't like I have a good mood. I just like take a look at it and look all the achievement that you did, and it will give you like some confirmation about you deserve what you have currently, and you are capable of doing that stuff that is like a delivery to you. Just like put the work on it and forget about the imposter syndrome. And also sometimes we just need to make like an imposter syndrome like a normal thing, because you will deal it with it a lot of time. So just like have it like a normal situation and just deal with it and move on, because there's other stuff that you need to focus on all more than just like this syndrome.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to cover when it comes to imposter syndrome, and that's why it's so individual. You know, what makes me feel like an imposter is not going to be what makes you feel like an imposter. And so while there are common tools in your toolkit, like we both have our own like a wins journal essentially, we can both apply that, but it's going to look different for each of us. What is
Yes,
success to me
exactly.
is not the same as success to you.
Yes.
And so that's kind of how this course is rounding out at the very end, is really creating that sustainable anti-imposter plan. Like, okay, this happens. Here's how I react. This is how I revisit this plan, 6 months down the road, a year down the road. I'm going to continue to grow in my career. You're going to continue to grow in your career. As you build more confidence, you're going to it's what kind of makes you feel like an imposter, what kind of introduces those imposter thoughts, is going to change over time, and therefore your plan should also change over time as well. So this is basically, it's 8 modules that I'll have covered in this document, or in this course, which I'm really excited about.
Awesome. So talking about, I think the last part of the introduction is the newsletter that you have called Lesson in Engineering Leadership. I'm not sure if it's still like live or not, but can you give the audience more detail
Yeah,
about this newsletter and what they can get from it?
it is live, but under a new name. So it's now
Ah,
called The
okay.
Modern Leader, which is at modernleader.is. And every week I send 2 newsletters. One is a very quick, easy, digestible newsletter on a particular topic in leadership. This week's, for example, was about how you can connect management to hospitality, like the hospitality business. This is a free newsletter that goes out to everybody. And then on Fridays, I send out a second newsletter that is only to our all access members. So the paid subscribers that get a deeper dive into that topic. They might get additional scripts to use in their day to day, additional tools to use in their, to add to their toolkit, just to kind of continue to build upon your experience as a leader. What's cool about this newsletter is that it's not just limited to engineering leaders. Like this kind of this content applies across the board in just general leadership. So yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. I have over a year's worth of content published at this point, and so there's a lot to sift through. There's something for everyone. So, regardless of where you're at in your field, in your career, like even if you're not, managing people, you're most definitely going to benefit from this newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you so much for mentioning that. I think all the links that we mentioned in this podcast will be in the description of this video or the show note. Can you give the audience like some resources and link for people that would like to reach out to you, and resources for someone that would like to get started in entrepreneurship with a software engineering background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would start with, for my social links, LinkedIn, Kelly Vaughn, that's my name. Twitter is KVLLY. Where else am I? I'm on Threads with Kelly Vaughn with 3 L's. My personal website has all these links as well, which is kvlly.com. So you can find that there. Again, my newsletter, Modern Leader, is modernleader.is. I actually have a second newsletter that is kind of a quiet pet project called Tiny Triumphs. That's tinytriumphs.xyz. That is a daily newsletter for small productivity changes that you can make in your day to day. Very, very bite sized, hence tiny. That can really make a difference over time. So outside of that, resources, Start Freelancing Today. You can find that on Amazon, as I mentioned before. On my newsletter as well, there is a lot of really good, there's a page on all of my favorite leadership books. These kinds of things apply in entrepreneurship as well. And so I highly recommend taking a look at that. Again, modernleader.is is where you're going to find the book's recommendation as well. Is there anything else I'd recommend? I think that's a good place to leave it.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Kylie, for your time. I know you have like a very busy schedule, and thank you for taking the podcast into account in your schedule. And it was a pleasure hosting you. It was really special because I learned so much when I was learning Shopify specifically with the Taproom Agency, like at the Start Freelancer Today ebook, and also there is some good blog posts that you share, I think, in your personal website or the Taproom Agency website. It was really a pleasure hosting you for today's episode.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.